A renowned chef opens a sophisticated restaurant. When a talented cook enters the scene, he soon falls in love, without imagining that she is the daughter of his greatest rival. Lee Min-ho, a renowned chef at 38 years old, had recently achieved a long-held dream to open his own restaurant, the sophisticated Flavors of Tomorrow. Located in the heart of Seoul, the place quickly became a landmark, famous for its innovative culinary creations and impeccable dishes. The restaurant's decor reflected the personality of its founder, elegant and contemporary, creating an atmosphere that invited customers to enjoy a unique gastronomic experience. Lee was an extremely talented and committed man, but there was something in his eyes that suggested a troubled past. He was quite focused and strict, not showing weakness to his subordinates. Everyone wondered why he was so bitter, since he was a very successful man. What they didn't know was that he carried a dark secret, an event that had almost ruined his career and personal life, and the chef had fought hard to rebuild his reputation, which had hardened him. One day, a young 25-year-old chef, Kim Yoo-jin, arrived at Flavors of Tomorrow. She was determined and dreamy, with the sparkle in her eyes of someone who has a great goal to be achieved. Since she began her journey in the culinary world, she had observed Min-ho and saw in him a great opportunity to achieve her own dreams, having one in particular, to achieve revenge for her father. Yes, Yoo-jin also kept a secret. She was the daughter of the man that Lee had hurt so much in the past, and she was willing to settle this score in honor of her father. The opportunity to work at Flavors of Tomorrow arose, and the young woman did not let it escape. She got an interview with the chef, a meeting she had been preparing for years. Still, she was tense, afraid of making a mistake, and losing the chance to put her plan into action. Fortunately, she was passionate about cooking and had exceptional culinary skills, much inherited from her father, which impressed Lee. "You have talent," he said, watching her intently. "But talent alone is not enough. Here we don't accept anyone who is not willing to dedicate themselves fully to the kitchen. Are you willing to work hard?" "Yes, chef. I grew up and live cooking every day. My great dream is to be able to cook in a restaurant like yours," replied Yoo-jin, determined. Lee was silent for seconds that seemed like an eternity, seeming to think about the decision he would make. Luckily for Kim, she was hired and immediately began her work journey at the restaurant. Every day, the young woman demonstrated her talent and dedication. She was the first to arrive at Flavors of Tomorrow and the last to leave. She was tireless, always ready to learn and meet what was needed. Her co-workers quickly came to respect and admire her, even those who had many years of experience, since, in addition to being hardworking, she was always willing to listen to advice from the most experienced and improve her performance. Her attitudes caught Lee's attention, who began to trust her more, giving her more complex tasks and spending more time teaching her personally. The newcomer stood out not only for her technical skill, but also for the creativity she brought to the dishes. The relationship between mentor and apprentice began to take shape. The experienced chef was demanding, but fair. He taught with rigor, but also with patience, and the apprentice absorbed each lesson as someone who showed that she wanted to reach high places. In some quieter moments, usually when the shift ended, the employees would leave and both would stay later to advance the next day's demands, sharing parts of their stories, without, of course, revealing their deepest secrets. "Why did you choose cooking?" Lee asked one night while cutting some vegetables that he would take to the freezer. Kim hesitated for a moment before answering, as she did not want to give any clues about her real goal at the restaurant. "It's always been my dream. Cooking has the power to create wonderful memories and mark us forever. It is closely linked to sensations and feelings. I want to be able to create happy moments that mark people with wonderful dishes, just like yours." The chef smiled openly, unable to hide his enchantment with that answer. Kim was surprised by that smile, since she had never seen the chef open up like that, and could not help but think, "Wow, he's handsome." Without realizing it, she stared at him, observing his features better, the details of his face, his hair that hung on his forehead. "Cooking has the power to transform lives," he said, thinking about his own past. "You have shown a lot of commitment and talent, Kim. Keep it up and you will go very far in your career," he completed. She blushed at the compliment and, realizing that she was still staring at Lee's beauty, lowered her head and managed to say, "Thank you, chef." Coming from you, these words mean a lot to me." For a few moments, Kim got lost in thoughts of admiration for Lee, and almost forgot that her goal there was only one: to destroy Flavors of Tomorrow, to avenge the chef for the ruin of her father's restaurant. "Stay focused, Kim. Focus on the plan," she thought to herself. Over time, the professional relationship between the chef and Kim was strengthening, with her having passed the probationary period and becoming an effective cook in the restaurant. Wishing to show her effort and gain Lee's trust more and more, it had become routine for her to stay at the place after everyone left to help him with the tidying up and food preparations, moments in which they always talked about many things besides cooking and got to know each other more and more. Despite having the initial plan in mind, Kim could not deny that she loved being in Lee's presence, learning from him about cooking and sometimes simply laughing at silly things. She was surprised by this side of Lee, because during working hours he was strict, serious, extremely focused, and did not give anyone the freedom to access his personal side. But, with her, when only the two of them were together, he turned into another person: charismatic, smiling, playful. It seemed that a great weight was lifted from his shoulders, and he could simply be himself, without pressure. She felt special and flattered that he showed this other side of him to her when her mind started to realize, "Wow, he must be in love with me." After this thought crossed her mind, Kim began to observe Lee's behavior more carefully when he was with her. He always stared at her, following her with his eyes when she moved. Sometimes, when she caught him off guard, she realized that he was watching her and then turned his face away to disguise it. He always took any opportunity to teach her something while they were cooking, and at times he would hold her hand to help her stir the pots. One day, when they were saying goodbye while he was closing the restaurant, he hesitated for a moment and then offered her a ride home. She refused, saying that she needed to go take care of some things, but she could see the frustration in his eyes. "If he's in love with me, it will be even easier for me to carry out my revenge plan. Being his girlfriend, I will be able to access what I need to destroy Flavors of Tomorrow and avenge my father," she thought. "That's it. I'll reciprocate Lee's affection, and then I'll leave him in ruins." To keep herself motivated, Kim kept photos and letters from her father, a man whose life had been drastically changed by Lee's actions, and these memories made her reflect on her goal in the restaurant and on the moment when her secret would inevitably be revealed. The dynamic between Lee Min-ho and Kim Yoo-jin continued to strengthen, and in one of their moments together alone, the young chef showed her mentor a soup recipe that she had created. He was leaning against the counter watching her movements next to the pots, until she turned around and put a spoonful in the chef's mouth, eager for his approval. "What do you think?" she asked, facing him. The master tasted it, and his eyes lit up. "It's wonderful, Kim," he said, looking into her eyes and then down at her mouth. And then, Lee gently rested his right hand on Kim's neck and slowly closed the small distance that still existed between them, kissing her passionately. This took her by surprise, and her heart began to beat so fast that it seemed to jump out of her chest, but she reciprocated with as much passion as he did. After the kiss, they both looked at each other, and still breathless, Lee gave a big smile and asked Kim if she would be his girlfriend. She said yes, still processing what was happening. When he dropped her off at home, she, now alone, stopped to reflect on everything that had happened and was startled when she realized that her plan would be more difficult than she imagined, because the kiss revealed that she was also in love with Lee. "I have to stay strong. My feelings for Lee cannot change what I came here to do. For years I have been waiting for the moment to do to him the same thing he did to my father. I won't back down now." The days passed, and although to everyone's eyes the couple seemed more and more united and in love, the shadow of the past continued to hover over both of them, and Kim Yoo-jin always had in mind that the relationship was only for her to have facilities in her revenge, despite her heart wanting to say the opposite whenever they were together. The perfect opportunity to start the big plan came when Lee invited her to help him with the financial part of the restaurant, since the employee responsible for the sector was sick. Kim Yoo-jin then began to buy products at prices well above average, stopped paying taxes, which generated several daily fines for the establishment, did not pay several suppliers, which culminated in the lack of several important items for the restaurant, among many other acts of sabotage. All the employees, especially Lee, began to notice that something was not right, especially when ingredients and materials for daily use of the restaurant began to be missing, causing a terrible impression on customers, since their favorite dishes began to be always out of stock. However, the chef could not understand what was happening, because when he talked to Kim about it, she always said that everything was fine, and presented him with documents that proved the due payment to all suppliers. What Lee did not suspect was that these documents had been forged by Kim, and it was she who was destroying Flavors of Tomorrow from the inside. After a few weeks of total chaos in the restaurant, Lee was at his stress level limit, not knowing how or why so many terrible things had started to happen to his long-dreamed-of enterprise. He began to show signs of extreme anxiety, as none of this made the slightest sense. After work, he always took Kim home and spent some time with her, venting about everything and showing his weaknesses. She gave him the comfort he needed, fighting against herself to act as if she were not to blame for all of Lee's suffering. However, when he left, she cried and wondered if it was really worth doing all that, maintaining all that lie, destroying the biggest dreams of the man that, at this point in the game, she inevitably loved so much. When such thoughts came to light, she would take a picture of her dear father to try to regain focus, but it was increasingly difficult to endure the double life she had built. One day, when early, before Flavors of Tomorrow opened to the public, an employee came to inform Lee Min-ho that, again, the vegetable and meat suppliers had not gone to the restaurant to deliver the merchandise, and several dishes could not be served that day. The chef exploded with anger, went to the office and called the vendors, indignant with their lack of commitment to a client like him. To his surprise, both suppliers informed that they were not making deliveries of food due to the lack of payment that had been occurring for many weeks, which made it impossible to maintain the partnership. Min-ho argued that this was impossible, since the person who was responsible for the finances was extremely trustworthy, and there were proof of payment. The two vendors, however, reaffirmed that they had been at a loss for a long time and could no longer help Flavors of Tomorrow, including, to receive the overdue payments urgently. Distraught, Lee Min-ho changed his clothes, grabbed his things, and went to Kim Yoo-jin's house, who that day had informed that she would not work because she had woken up very sick. After ringing the doorbell and Kim opening the door, how great was his surprise to see her without any sign of illness. She seemed startled by Lee's unexpected presence and began to speak hesitantly. "Ah, hi, my love. I wasn't expecting you here. Shouldn't you be at the restaurant? It's almost time to open." "The restaurant won't open today. We don't have any stock to operate. Our suppliers claim that they have been taking a hit for a long time and will no longer deliver the goods. You told me that the financial administration was perfect. What is happening, Kim?" Lee said, confused and extremely nervous, realizing that Kim's illness was a lie. I don't know what you're talking about," said the young woman, avoiding eye contact with her boyfriend. "There's something very wrong with this story. I'm seeing Flavors of Tomorrow being ruined. Everything I've always fought to build is dying and I'm powerless, not even knowing what to do to solve it," said the chef, the despair showing in his eyes. "Now you know exactly how my father felt. What a great irony that your grand restaurant was destroyed by the daughter of the chef you wronged so much, isn't it?" Kim said, her voice full of bitterness. Time seemed to freeze for Lee. A movie about his troubled past flashed in his mind, and he couldn't believe the words he had just heard from the mouth of his beloved. What? What madness is she talking about? "So, she is the daughter of..." "Yes, I am the daughter of Wonho, the chef you destroyed," she said, seeming to read Lee's mind. And she continued, "For many years I have seen my father's suffering after the restaurant he loved so much failed, and I was determined to take revenge on the cause of his bankruptcy. When I found out you had opened Flavors of Tomorrow, I left Gyeongju and came to Seoul with one goal, to end your life. I falsified all the accounting documents while sabotaging your restaurant. Judging by your look of terror, I think I was doing a good job." Lee Min-ho was distraught. His gaze was fixed on Kim, and some tears began to roll down his face. He couldn't move or speak. He could only think about the revelation he had just received and how his entire reality had changed from that moment on. The talented cook he had fallen in love with was the daughter of his enemy from the past and had pretended to love him only to implode his restaurant. My God, he couldn't imagine any scenario worse than this. Kim, but how? Why did you… The chef tried to speak, but only stammered and couldn't form a sentence. Suddenly he turned and quickly walked out the door, leaving Kim alone. She, without avoiding it, released the breath she was holding to appear strong in front of Lee, and then began to cry compulsively, feeling extremely miserable. She went to Seoul imagining that there would be a feeling of accomplishment and pride when her secret was finally discovered, but in reality, she felt destroyed inside. "Goodbye, Lee Min-ho," she said between sobs while looking at the still open door. A few weeks had passed since Kim Yoo-jin had returned to her parents' house in Gyeongju in the interior of South Korea. She was happy to be with her family again, but she also showed a state of distraction and a lost look that she couldn't disguise. Her heart ached for having lost Lee's love, and at this point, she had serious doubts if it had all been worth it. Unable to get rid of the feeling of guilt, she sought out her father and confessed to him everything she had done during the time she was working in Seoul. She told him that she started working at Flavors of Tomorrow with the intention of taking revenge on Lee Min-ho, because a few years ago she had found letters addressed to her father that pointed to Lee as the cause of his professional ruin, and from then on, she had fueled the resentment and desire for reparation in her heart. She also said that Lee fell in love with her and she loved him too, but that, even so, she carried out her plan to the end and left the restaurant in a terrible situation, almost bankrupt, and that now she was no longer sure if she had done the right thing. On the contrary, her heart was broken and she felt very bad. Won-ho, her father, seemed not to believe what he was hearing, but he felt compassion for his daughter, who was at his feet breaking down in tears. "Kim Yoo-jin, my daughter. I understand your motivations, but if I had known you had something like this in mind, I would never have allowed you to leave for Seoul. Revenge is always bad and corrupts your soul, my daughter. You are now tasting the bitter flavor that resentment causes," the father said, and continued. "Besides, Kim, you acted irresponsibly. You jumped to conclusions about documents you found and didn't even look for me to understand everything that really happened." Kim's expression changed and became one of extreme concern. How could she have jumped to conclusions? Her heart was now pounding with the possibility of having been wrong and committed such an injustice. "Lee Min-ho was not responsible for what happened to my restaurant, my daughter. What you read in those letters were lies that the real traitor had told to get rid of the blame. Lee was a young dreamer and one of my best and most promising cooks. More than a master, he also saw me as a father, and working at the restaurant was everything to him." Won-ho began to explain and continued. "My partner was embezzling money from the restaurant, and when everything started to fall apart, he forged evidence to blame Lee. From then on, he was fired, and I took it upon myself to make sure that no other chef hired him in the entire region. Later, my restaurant went bankrupt, and I ended up finding out that the real culprit was my partner, who was reported to the police and prosecuted." At this moment, tears also welled up in Won-ho's eyes as he recalled, "Unfortunately, it was too late for me to make things right with Lee. He moved away after going through very bad times without being able to find work and being seen by everyone as a criminal, and I never heard from him again. I'm glad he was able to overcome and succeed in Seoul." Kim Yoo-jin was in shock. How could she have been so reckless? Her entire revenge plan had turned into a great nightmare, from which she knew it would not be possible to wake up. All that was left for her was to pray that Lee Min-ho would be able to take back his restaurant, but the guilt for having done so much harm to the man who only gave her love would never end. One day, while tending the garden lost in thought, Kim was surprised by a familiar voice which made her body tremble. "Hello, Kim Yoo-jin." It was him, Lee Min-ho, right there in front of her. She blushed and couldn't believe her eyes. "How did you find me here?" she said, her voice soft. "Your father looked for me. He went to Flavors of Tomorrow. We talked for a long time. He apologized to me for what happened in our past and we made up," Min-ho said. Kim widened her eyes in surprise and said, "Really? Wow. Well, I'm very happy about that. After I returned home, I had a long talk with him and, well," she was trying to find the words. The shame for what she had done was so great that she could only look at her own feet. "I need to apologize to you, Lee. I was very unfair and foolish. I should never have done everything I did to your restaurant and also taken advantage of your feelings and hurt you so much. Please forgive me." The tears fell, and Kim flinched when she felt Lee's hand on her face, drying them. They exchanged a deeply emotional look, and remained like that for a while, without saying anything. Lee then broke the silence. "I was very distraught when I found out the truth, and all I could think was that, even after so many years, your father had sent you to finish ruining my life." Lee paused to observe Kim, who was still crying, and then continued. "When he looked for me and told me what had happened to his old partner, and why you had acted that way, I felt relieved because, despite having everything, I realized that you were a misguided woman just trying to honor your father. You chose a disastrous way to do it, I must say. But I felt better when he told me that you were very sorry, and that your feelings for me were not fake." Kim held his gaze and said, her voice trembling, "Yes, Lee. Everything we lived together was real. I fought with myself every day because I loved you, but the resentment I had kept for so many years still left me blind. When I realized all the injustice I had committed, my life became unbearable with such guilt." Taking a breath, she found the strength to continue saying, "I fell in love from the beginning, Lee Min-ho. If your feelings for me have survived and it is possible to overcome what happened, I ask you to give me a chance to start over from scratch, and I will prove that I am worthy of you and Flavors of Tomorrow." Moved, Lee's response was a sweet kiss on Kim, which demonstrated the strength of regret, forgiveness, and love in their relationship. From that moment on, Lee Min-ho and Kim Yoo-jin decided to face the future together, both as partners in the kitchen and in their personal lives, without secrets and with great complicity. Flavors of Tomorrow was rebuilt and flourished even more, fueled by the passion and love of the two chefs for cooking, and above all, for each other. And if you liked this story, the next video that is appearing on your screen will surely move you too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next videos. A big kiss, and until the next exciting story.